December 25th, 2020. The house smelled of cinnamon and pine. I didn't know it would be the day my life began to unravel. I still remember that morning as if it were painted into my bones. The sound of paper crinkling, the faint scent of cinnamon candles, the radio whispering Christmas carols that didn't seem to belong in my house anymore. I was sitting by the window, wrapping the last of the gifts I had bought for my family. A scarf for my daughter, a leather wallet for my son-in-law, and a tiny red sweater for my granddaughter, who'd just turned 5. Outside, the snow had fallen thick over the street, muffling every sound but my own breathing. It was Christmas morning, and I thought, foolishly naively, that maybe, just maybe, this would be the year my family would look at me and see more than an old woman with shaking hands and fading memories. Before I go any further, if you're listening right now, I want you to do something for me. If you've ever given your heart to someone and watched them tear it apart with a smile, click that like button. And tell me in the comments, what country are you watching from tonight? Because I think heartbreak sounds the same in every language, especially around Christmas. I was 68 then. My husband, Frank, had passed away 3 years earlier. A heart attack in his sleep. We'd been married 42 years. He used to say that our little blue house on Maple Avenue was his heaven on earth. We'd built it together, brick by brick, memory by memory. He laid the garden stones himself, carved our initials into the oak tree out front, and every December, he would hang those same old blinking lights, the ones that flickered more than they glowed. That house wasn't just wood and paint. It was the proof that love could live inside 4 walls. After Frank died, my daughter, Emily, and her husband, Dan, started visiting more often. At first, I was grateful. They'd come by every Sunday, bring groceries, fix things around the house. Emily would hug me and say, "Mom, you shouldn't be alone here. It's too much work for you." She said it with love, or at least I wanted to believe she did. But slowly, their visits started to feel less like kindness and more like surveillance. They'd whisper in corners. They'd ask questions about bills, about the deed, about what was in my name. I didn't think much of it. I was just glad to have them close. When you lose someone like Frank, the silence becomes its own kind of ghost. It lingers in every room. So when my daughter started staying over more often, I let her. I let her help with the mail. I let her sort through my files. I told myself it was love. That December, she told me she wanted to host Christmas at my house, one last time. She said it with a laugh, like it was a joke, one last Christmas before I downsized. I laughed, too. But when I asked what she meant, she said something I'll never forget. "Mom, you can't stay here forever. You need somewhere easier, maybe a condo closer to us." I remember the way my chest tightened, the way the lights seemed to dim just a little. I told her, "This is my home, Emily. I'll leave it when I die, not before." She smiled, that polite, patient smile people reserve for children and the elderly. "Of course, Mom," she said. But I could feel the distance stretching between us. 2 weeks before Christmas, I started noticing things missing. Little things at first, a jewelry box, some old documents, Frank's watch. Emily said she was keeping them safe. I didn't question her. She was my daughter, my only child. What reason would I have not to trust her? On Christmas Eve, I stayed up late, wrapping gifts while the snow kept falling. The radio played Silent Night, and I remember whispering along. I thought about Frank. I thought about how he'd always say, "Christmas isn't about gifts, it's about gratitude." I tried to feel grateful. I really did. But when I went to bed that night, something gnawed at me. A small, sharp unease I couldn't name. Maybe it was the way Emily and Dan had been acting. Their hushed phone calls, their sudden kindness. Or maybe it was just old age making me paranoid. Either way, I told myself to sleep. Tomorrow would be Christmas. I woke up to laughter downstairs. The smell of coffee and pancakes filled the air. For a brief, shining moment, it felt like the world was still kind. I put on my robe, tied it with trembling fingers, and went down the stairs, humming to myself. Emily was by the stove, Dan was setting the table, and my granddaughter, sweet little Lily, ran up to me, her tiny hands clutching a glittery card. "Merry Christmas, Grandma," she said, and hugged me with all her small might. I bent down to kiss her forehead. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart," I said, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. For a moment, everything felt right. Then the doorbell rang. Dan went to answer it, still smiling. I didn't pay attention at first. I was too busy arranging gifts under the tree. But then I heard voices. Low, serious voices. A man's tone, clipped and professional. I turned around just as 2 strangers stepped into my living room. One wore a long coat and carried a clipboard. The other had a badge. "Mrs. Henderson?" the man asked. "Yes." I said, confused. I'm here on behalf of Maple Realty. We're here to finalize the transfer. I blinked. Transfer? He looked at his papers. Yes, ma'am. The property, 427 Maple Avenue, was sold last week. I'm just here to confirm the handover. For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. Then I saw Emily freeze by the stove. Dan looked away, and something in my chest broke. What are you talking about? I asked, my voice shaking. This is my house. The man hesitated, then handed me the clipboard. My name was on the papers. My signature, except it wasn't my handwriting. I looked at Emily. What is this? She stepped forward, her eyes darting everywhere but mine. Mom, she said softly, we needed to do this. It's for your own good. You can't take care of this place anymore. For my own good? I whispered. You sold my house. Dan spoke up then, his voice calm, rehearsed. We already arranged for you to move into a retirement community, Helen. It's all set. You'll be safe, cared for. I didn't let him finish. I slammed the clipboard down on the table. Safe? You stole my home. The room went silent, except for the faint hum of the radio still playing a Christmas song. I looked around at the tree, the lights, the gifts, and suddenly, everything felt cruelly wrong. That was the moment I realized. They hadn't come to celebrate Christmas with me. They'd come to take everything I had left. I stood there, trembling as the truth sank in. The man from Maple Realty began to speak again, his words slicing through the air like a knife wrapped in politeness. Mrs. Henderson, the new owners will be moving in after the holidays. I just need a few signatures confirming the property's release. Your daughter mentioned you were aware of the arrangement. Aware? The word burned. I wasn't aware of anything. Not the meetings, not the sale, not the lies written in ink that bore my forged name. Emily tried to touch my shoulder, but I stepped back as if her fingers were fire. Don't, I said, my voice low, trembling. Don't touch me. Lily stood there, clutching her little Christmas card, her wide eyes darting between us. She didn't understand, and I didn't want her to. I didn't want her to see the ugliness behind the tinsel and the tree. I wanted her to remember her grandmother as someone who smiled, who baked cookies, who sang carols off-key. Not as a woman being betrayed in her own living room. I told the men to get out. I didn't care about their documents or their polite apologies. I pointed to the door, and they left. The silence that followed was unbearable. The kind that presses against your ears and makes you aware of every heartbeat, every breath. Emily started crying then. Or maybe pretending to. Mom, you don't understand. You were falling behind on bills. You're not thinking clearly these days. We had to act before things got worse. Her words echoed with something darker, the same tone she'd used when she mentioned downsizing. I realized she'd been preparing this for months, maybe years. The missing documents, the help with my mail, the way she'd insisted on managing my finances just to make things easier. You forged my signature, I said quietly. You lied to me. Dan sighed, his voice as smooth as glass. It's not lying, Helen. It's protecting you. You could have fallen. You could have burned yourself cooking. You need supervision now. That word, supervision, struck something deep and primal in me. I had raised my daughter. I had kept that house running through storms, sickness, grief. I had built a life brick by brick, and now my own child was speaking to me like I was a burden to be managed. I felt something inside me snap. Get out, I said again. Emily's face twisted with hurt, or maybe guilt, but she didn't move. Mom, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. The deal's done. You'll love the new place. It's close to us. I said get out. My voice cracked like thunder, louder than I'd heard it in years. Even Lily flinched. Emily grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the door. Dan muttered something about taking some time to calm down. The door closed behind them, and suddenly I was alone. Alone on Christmas morning, in a house that no longer belonged to me. The lights on the tree blinked slowly, mocking me. One red, one green, one gold. My reflection in the window looked like a ghost, pale, hollow-eyed, wrapped in a robe that smelled faintly of lavender and heartbreak. I don't remember how long I stood there. Maybe minutes, maybe hours. I just know that the snow outside kept falling, soft and relentless, as if the world was trying to cover everything in silence. When the knock came again, I almost didn't answer. But it wasn't Emily this time. It was my neighbor, Rose. She was holding a casserole dish, her breath fogging in the cold. Merry Christmas, Helen, she said softly. Then she saw my face. Oh, honey, what happened? I didn't want to tell her. I didn't want anyone to know how foolish I'd been, how easily I'd trusted the people who should have protected me. But when I opened my mouth, the words poured out, messy, cracked, unstoppable. Rose set the casserole down, took my hands, and listened. She didn't interrupt. She didn't tell me to calm down. She just held on. When I finished, she looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You need to fight this." I laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. "Fight what? It's done. They sold it." Rose shook her head. "If they forged your signature, that's a crime. You can report it. You still have rights, Helen. You're not helpless." Helpless? Another word I'd grown used to hearing. Doctors, bank clerks, even Emily, they all said it like it was fact. But as Rose spoke, something old and stubborn stirred inside me. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was the ghost of Frank whispering, "Don't let them take everything." That night, after Rose left, I sat at the kitchen table with the papers the realtor had left behind. I studied every line, every number, every signature. And the more I looked, the clearer it became. The handwriting wasn't just forged. It was sloppy. Too quick, too confident. Dan had probably done it himself, thinking no one would ever question an old woman's memory. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I made coffee, sat in Frank's chair, and stared at the window until the snow turned to gray slush. Then I picked up the phone. The next morning, I called a lawyer. His name was David Miller, a quiet man in his 40s with kind eyes and a voice that carried a calm sort of authority. I told him everything. He listened carefully, then asked to see the documents. When I brought them in, he didn't even need 10 minutes. "This signature's been forged," he said. "And judging by the date, they filed the sale using a power of attorney that's also fake." I felt both vindicated and sick. "Can it be undone?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "It'll take time, but yes, we can challenge the sale. And if your daughter and son-in-law are involved, they'll be in serious legal trouble." For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. But I also knew something else, that by fighting this, I wasn't just taking on a legal battle. I was going to war with my own blood. That night, Emily called. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail, her voice trembling between anger and guilt. "Mom, please don't do this. You're confused. We were trying to help you. If you go to a lawyer, you'll ruin everything." Ruin everything. I sat there listening to her words over and over again, and I realized she wasn't afraid of me being confused. She was afraid of me remembering. So I called David the next morning and said, "Let's fight." The days that followed blurred together like melted snow. A quiet storm of phone calls, paperwork, and sleepless nights. David came by often, bringing forms, letters, and updates from the courthouse. Every time he spoke, his voice carried that same calm certainty that made me feel less like a ghost. He explained things gently, like I was someone worth explaining things to. It had been a long time since anyone spoke to me that way. But beneath every conversation, I felt the ache of something deeper. A mother's heartbreak. I'd raised Emily to be kind, to be honest, to fight for what was right. And yet, here I was, gathering proof that my own daughter had stolen the roof from above my head. By the second week of January, we had everything we needed. The forged signature, the fake power of attorney, even emails between Dan and the real estate agent that showed they'd posed as me. David said we could file for an injunction, and if the court agreed, the sale would be frozen. The words sounded powerful, but I still felt fragile. Like paper pretending to be steel. I remember sitting by the window that night, looking out at the street. The Christmas lights were gone now, stripped from porches and trees, leaving only the dull glow of street lamps. I could see my reflection in the glass, tired eyes, soft lines, a woman who'd lived long enough to learn that betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. That's when the phone rang again. "Emily." I almost didn't answer, but something in me, maybe hope, maybe habit, pressed the green button anyway. "Mom," she said, her voice small. "Can we talk?" I didn't say yes, but I didn't hang up either. She went on, her words stumbling. "I know you're angry. I need you to understand. We weren't trying to hurt you. We just thought it would be better for everyone." "Better for who?" I asked quietly. "For you," she said quickly. "You can't live alone anymore. You forget things, Mom. You left the oven on twice last month." "That doesn't mean I can't think," I said. "That doesn't mean you can sell my life behind my back." Her breath caught on the other end. For a second, I thought she might apologize. But instead, she said something that sliced me open. "You don't understand how hard it's been for us taking care of you, paying for things." "Paying for things?" I interrupted. "Emily, you used my pension. My savings. You took money out of my account every month. What exactly were you paying for?" The silence that followed was longer than the distance between us. Then her tone changed, sharp, defensive. "You're twisting everything. Dan said you'd do this. He said you'd make yourself the victim. I closed my eyes. Emily, I am your mother. I changed your diapers, I held you through fevers. I worked 2 jobs so you could go to college. You don't get to call me a liar in my own story. She hung up. I sat there for a long time after that, the dial tone humming like a broken lullaby. The next morning, David called. Good news, he said. The court approved the injunction. The sale's frozen until the case is resolved. I felt my knees weaken with relief. It wasn't over, but for the first time, the ground beneath me felt solid again. When I told Rose, she hugged me so tightly I could smell her lilac perfume. You did it, she said. You fought back. But victory didn't feel like joy. It felt like survival. Like I'd been treading water in icy darkness, and had just managed to gasp for air. Because even though the court had paused the sale, I still had to live with the knowledge of what my daughter had done. Weeks passed. There were hearings, depositions, questions. Emily and Dan denied everything, of course. They said I had authorized the sale. They said I was confused. They said I was losing my memory. And the worst part, the lawyer they hired tried to make me sound insane. He asked me on the stand if I took medication. I said yes, for my blood pressure. He asked if I'd ever forgotten where I put my keys. I said yes, of course, who hasn't? He smiled at that, like it was proof. Like a misplaced key could erase a lifetime of clarity. I could feel Emily watching me as I testified. Her eyes didn't look like they used to. Not warm, not familiar. Just cold, distant, almost scared. I wanted to believe there was guilt buried somewhere deep inside her. But all I saw was someone who'd convinced herself she was right. When it was over, David helped me down from the stand. You did perfectly, he said. Just a few more steps and we'll have this settled. A few more steps. It sounded so simple, but it wasn't. Because after that hearing, I went home to a house that didn't feel like mine anymore. The walls whispered betrayal. Every photo frame felt like evidence of something broken. I couldn't even look at Frank's chair without hearing his voice asking, "How did it come to this, Helen?" One night, I woke up from a dream, Frank standing in the doorway, smiling. He didn't say anything, just looked at me with that quiet understanding he always had. When I reached out, he vanished. I sat there in the dark, whispering, "I'm trying, Frank. I really am." A few days later, I got a letter from the court. The sale had been declared invalid. The house was mine again. Legally, at least. But by then, I'd already packed half my things. The house didn't feel like home anymore. Emily didn't call. Not once. It's strange, isn't it? How we can spend a lifetime building something, love, trust, a family, and all it takes is one signature, real or forged, to make it crumble. I didn't celebrate. I didn't tell anyone except Rose and David. I just stood in the living room, looking at the blinking lights I hadn't taken down since Christmas. They flickered like tired stars, refusing to go out. That's when I decided something. I wasn't going to stay. Not because they forced me out, but because I wanted to leave on my own terms. I didn't want to haunt that house. I wanted to start over somewhere quiet, where no one would look at me with pity or suspicion. I found a small cottage by the lake, 2 rooms, a porch, and an old wood stove that still worked if you coaxed it right. When I moved in, Rose helped me unpack. She hung one photo on the wall, me and Frank on our wedding day. "Start with this," she said. "You can build the rest again." I smiled through tears. Maybe I will. And for the first time in months, I slept without dreaming of betrayal. But deep down, I knew Christmas would never feel the same again. The days that followed felt softer somehow, not happy, not healed, but quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't scare you anymore. The lake outside my window froze over by February, its still surface mirroring the pale winter sky. Every morning, I'd sit on the porch with my tea, listening to the wood stove crackle and the faint creak of the frozen water. There were no phone calls now, no lawyers, no shouting. Just the wind, the birds, and sometimes the distant laughter of children skating on the far end of the lake. For the first time in years, I didn't feel watched. Or judged. Or used. I felt alone, but it was a peaceful kind of alone. One afternoon, Rose stopped by with a pie and her warm, stubborn smile. "Thought you could use a little sweetness," she said. We sat together by the fire, eating in silence. Eventually, she looked around my new home and said, "It's small, but it feels safe." "It is," I said. "And that's all I ever wanted." She nodded. "You deserve peace, Helen. After everything you do." Her words lingered long after she left. Peace. Such a small word for something that costs so much. That night, I lit a single candle by the window. The last of the Christmas lights were gone now, but the candlelight danced gently across the glass, casting faint shadows on the snow outside. I thought of Frank again, his laugh, his steady hands, the way he used to hum old Christmas songs while fixing the ornaments on the tree. I whispered into the quiet, "I'm still here, Frank. Still fighting. Still breathing." And for a moment, I could almost hear him hum back. Spring came slowly, like forgiveness. The lake thawed, the birds returned, and I planted a small garden, roses, daisies, and lavender. It felt strange at first, growing things in a place where I'd once come to escape. But every new leaf, every tiny bloom, reminded me that even broken soil can hold life again. One morning, while watering the flowers, I found an envelope in my mailbox. No return address, just my name, written in a handwriting I knew too well. Emily. For a long moment, I just stared at it. My hands trembled and my breath caught. I almost threw it away. But something inside me whispered, "Open it." The letter was short. "Mom, I don't know if you'll ever forgive me. Dan's gone. We lost everything. I was wrong about you, about everything. I thought I was helping, but I only destroyed what mattered most. I hope you're safe. Love, Emily." I read it twice. Then again. The words felt heavy, like they'd been written with regret instead of ink. I didn't cry. Not like before. Instead, I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the drawer beside Frank's photo. Maybe someday, I'd write her back. Maybe not. Forgiveness, I'd learned, isn't a door you fling open. It's a window you slowly crack when you're ready to breathe again. That Christmas, a year later, I decorated my little cottage with simple things: pine branches, 2 candles, and 1 silver ornament that Frank and I bought on our first Christmas together. The snow fell softly that night, blanketing the world in silence. I sat by the window watching the flakes melt against the glass and whispered, "Merry Christmas, Frank." "Merry Christmas, Emily." No reply. No miracles. Just peace. And maybe that was enough. Because life doesn't always give you happy endings. Sometimes it just gives you a quiet one. And in that quiet, if you listen closely, you can still hear the faint sound of love, not the kind that betrays or breaks, but the kind that stays, even when everything else falls away.